In the dust of the ancient Near East, where empires rose and fell with the turning of centuries, one figure emerged whose vision extended beyond battlefields and crowns. He was Darius, later remembered as Darius the Great, the man who transformed Persia from a kingdom of fragile alliances into the largest empire the world had yet seen. His story begins not in triumph, but in uncertainty, for he was not born destined to rule. When Cyrus the Great died, and his son Cambyses inherited the throne, Persia teetered between stability and chaos. Cambyses' death in 522 BCE unleashed a storm. A pretender seized the throne, claiming to be Bardia, Cyrus's other son, though whispers spread that he was an impostor, a usurper cloaked in deception. Amid this turmoil, Darius, a member of a prominent noble family and a distant relative of the royal line, saw opportunity. He rallied loyalists, cut through the pretender's claims, and in a calculated strike seized the crown. Unlike so many others who clawed their way to power only to falter, Darius secured his rule with brilliance and speed. Yet the throne was not enough. He inherited a vast territory stretching from the Indus Valley to the Aegean, from the deserts of Egypt to the peaks of Central Asia. But it was fractured, restless, and vulnerable to revolt. Here was the stage upon which Darius began to craft his legend. He recognized that a kingdom could not endure on conquests alone. Armies might crush rebellions, but only order and vision could preserve dominion across diverse lands and peoples. He embarked on reforms that would become the backbone of his reign. He divided the empire into satrapies or provinces, each governed by a satrap, but bound tightly by the king's authority. He ordered standardized taxation, ensuring wealth flowed steadily into imperial coffers. He established a single coinage, the daric, so merchants could trade across thousands of miles without fear of fluctuating currencies. But Darius was not content with mere administration. He understood the power of symbols, the need for empire to feel eternal. He commissioned monumental inscriptions, such as the famous Behistun carving, etched high on cliffs for all to see. In bold words, he declared his legitimacy, his victories, his divine right to rule. The carving was more than propaganda. It was a declaration that Persia, under his hand, would not fracture. Yet Darius's genius was not confined to politics. His true greatness, the reason he is remembered among history's most formidable generals, lay in his ability to wield military power with vision. When revolts erupted across the empire in the first years of his reign, he personally led campaigns to crush them. In Elam, in Babylon, in the east among restless tribes, he moved with speed and precision. Time and again he defeated foes who thought Persia's vastness would protect them. Instead, his armies appeared with terrifying efficiency, enforcing his rule before opposition could take root. This early consolidation set the stage for something greater, not merely the maintenance of an empire, but the expansion of it. With stability at home, Darius turned outward, measuring himself not against rebellious satraps, but against history's mightiest powers. He cast his gaze westward, toward the lands of Greece and beyond, where city-states contested among themselves but also eyed Persia's wealth. He sought not only to subdue them, but to bring the known world under one dominion. Thus began the next chapter in his journey, a saga of campaigns and conquests that would test the limits of ambition and reveal the qualities that made Darius not merely a ruler, but a general whose strategies shaped centuries of conflict. The world was about to learn that his vision extended beyond borders, into the realm of destiny itself. The conquests of Darius unfolded like the careful weaving of a grand tapestry. Each thread stretched across distant lands until the whole shimmered with imperial unity. Yet Darius was no reckless conqueror. He did not hurl his armies into campaigns without thought. Instead, he measured each step, balancing ambition with calculation. His empire was vast, but he sought to make it seamless, and nowhere was his genius more evident than in the infrastructure that made conquest possible. He ordered the construction of the Royal Road, a marvel of organization that stretched nearly 1,700 miles across the empire. Along it, couriers could ride day and night carrying messages from Sardis to Susa in mere days rather than months. Relay stations with fresh horses allowed communications to travel with unprecedented speed. Herodotus marveled at the system, noting that nothing stopped the couriers. Not snow, not rain, not darkness. It was the lifeline of empire, allowing Darius to direct campaigns and govern provinces across distances that had once been unimaginable. The road was more than military utility. It was the artery of commerce and culture. Goods, ideas, and traditions traveled alongside soldiers and officials. In this sense, Darius conquered not only with the sword, but with the promise of connection. He envisioned a world where Egyptians, Lydians, Medes, and Indians alike were bound together under the Persian banner, their diversity preserved, but their loyalty secured. Yet unity required constant demonstration of strength. Revolts, though crushed, left lingering doubts. Darius knew he must prove not only to his subjects but to the world that Persia's might was unassailable. His gaze fell on Egypt, where resentment simmered under Persian control. In a dazzling display of strategy, Darius marched his forces into the land of the Nile. He respected Egyptian traditions, even commissioning inscriptions in their language and embracing aspects of their religion. By presenting himself not merely as conqueror but as pharaoh, he subdued Egypt without prolonged war. It was a blend of diplomacy and intimidation that became a hallmark of his style. But Darius's ambition reached further still. He sent expeditions eastward into the Indus Valley, extending Persian dominion into regions where elephants roamed and cultures flourished on the banks of the great river. Here, too, he employed not only force but careful governance. He appointed satraps, established taxation, and integrated local elites into imperial administration. The conquest was not an act of destruction, but of absorption, binding diverse peoples into the Persian system. At sea, he sought to master the waters as well as the land. He commissioned fleets from Phoenician and Greek shipbuilders, recognizing their unmatched skill in maritime warfare. He ordered the canal between the Nile and the Red Sea completed, connecting the Mediterranean with the Indian Ocean, an engineering feat that expanded trade and allowed naval forces to move swiftly between worlds. Darius was as much a general of logistics as of tactics, seeing war as an extension of infrastructure, planning, and vision. This relentless expansion inevitably brought him into contact with the Greeks of Asia Minor. The Ionian Revolt in 499 BCE ignited a clash that would shape history. The Ionian city-states, encouraged by Athens, rebelled against Persian control. Darius responded with force, mobilizing armies across Anatolia. He crushed the rebellion, sacked cities, and reasserted dominance. Yet the involvement of Athens did not escape his notice. Here, across the Aegean, was a defiant power whose pride threatened Persian supremacy. Thus began his legendary campaign against the Greek mainland. He assembled one of the most formidable armies the world had seen, drawn from every corner of his empire. Persians, Medes, Egyptians, Scythians, Indians, all marching under a single banner. The scale itself was a declaration. Persia was not merely a kingdom, but a world. His fleet paralleled the army, ensuring supplies and mobility across the Aegean. The invasion of Greece was not a mere punitive expedition. It was the logical extension of his vision. For Darius, the world was not divided into East and West, into Persian and Greek. It was one canvas, and he intended to paint it all with the colors of empire. His armies swept into the Aegean, subduing islands, bringing them under Persian control, and planting the seeds of fear in the hearts of the Greek city-states. The stage was set for a confrontation that would echo through time, the clash of a vast empire against a coalition of fiercely independent polities. At Marathon, the battle would test whether Darius's grand strategy could bend the Greek world into submission, or whether the defiance of a small state could resist the weight of the greatest empire of its age. The march toward Marathon was not merely the movement of soldiers, but the unfolding of a drama between two visions of the world. On one side stood Persia, vast, multicultural, organized with precision, its armies representing dozens of peoples drawn into the orbit of imperial power. On the other stood Athens, a city still experimenting with democracy, its power small by comparison but burning with a spirit of independence. For Darius, the campaign was about more than punishing a rebellious city-state. It was about demonstrating that no corner of the known world could defy the great king and remain unscathed. The Persian army landed on the plains of Marathon in 490 BCE, their numbers overwhelming by Greek standards. Persian cavalry, archers, and infantry prepared to bring the Athenians to heel. Darius had entrusted his generals with the task, confident in the superiority of his forces. The Athenians, joined by a small contingent from Plataea, faced the impossible choice of submission or defiance. They chose to fight. The battle that unfolded was not merely a clash of arms, but a test of strategy. The Persians relied on mobility, their archers and cavalry designed to harass and weaken opponents before infantry closed in. The Athenians, heavily armed hoplites in tight phalanx formations, chose to charge directly into the fray, closing the distance before arrows could decimate their ranks. In a stunning reversal of expectations, the Athenians broke the Persian lines, forcing them back toward the sea. Many Persians drowned as they fled to their ships, while others fell on the field. The defeat at Marathon was a rare blemish on Darius's record, a moment when the might of Persia seemed checked by an unlikely opponent. But Darius was not a man to be humbled by a single setback. To him, the loss was not the end of ambition, but a signal to prepare for a greater reckoning. He began gathering an even larger force, intent on returning to Greece and erasing the humiliation. Fate, however, intervened. Rebellions broke out in Egypt, demanding his attention, and age weighed upon him. In 486 BCE, before he could lead the second invasion, Darius died. His son, Xerxes, would inherit both the throne and the task of avenging Persia's defeat. And yet, even in death, Darius's legacy towered. The failure at Marathon did not undo his achievements, nor did it diminish his reputation among Persians as a masterful ruler and general. For in truth, his greatness did not rest solely on the outcome of single battles, but on the vision that guided his campaigns. He was the architect of empire, the man who proved that power could be projected across continents, that armies could be supplied across mountains, deserts, and seas. His military genius lay not only in tactics, but in strategy and logistics. He recognized that conquest required more than soldiers. It required roads, communication, administration, and the integration of conquered peoples into a functioning system. Where other conquerors saw only plunder, Darius saw permanence. He fought not to destroy, but to endure, and in doing so, he set a model for empire that would inspire rulers for centuries to come. His monuments stand as silent witnesses to this vision. At Persepolis, the grand ceremonial capital he founded, stairways rise toward halls adorned with carvings of delegates from every corner of the empire, bringing tribute to the king. Egyptians, Medes, Indians, and Greeks are all depicted, not as slaves, but as subjects bound together in a greater order. It was propaganda, yes, but also a reflection of Darius's worldview, that diversity could be marshaled into strength, that unity was possible under the mantle of empire. The Behistun inscription, carved into cliffs unreachable without effort, remains another testament. It depicts Darius, bow in hand, standing over the defeated usurper, while divine figures grant him legitimacy. Its words narrate his victories over rebels, his restoration of order, his faith in Ahura Mazda. For those who could not read, the images spoke loudly. Darius was chosen by the gods, his authority unquestionable. In reflecting on his reign, one sees a man who combined force with vision, brutality with statesmanship, conquest with construction. He was a general but also an administrator, a builder, a propagandist, a dreamer. His greatness lay in this fusion, in his ability to wield armies with the same precision that he wielded symbols and laws. Thus, when one calls Darius the greatest general in history, it is not in the sense of battlefield brilliance alone, though he possessed it. It is because he understood that true generalship is the command of worlds, the orchestration of forces beyond swords and shields. He commanded empires as others commanded battalions, shaping not just the outcome of wars, but the destiny of civilizations. To understand Darius's uniqueness, one must place him among the pantheon of great commanders. Alexander of Macedon would one day sweep across Persia, but his conquests, dazzling though they were, burned brightly and then collapsed within a generation. Julius Caesar extended Rome's dominion, yet Rome too would fracture. Genghis Khan forged an empire with fire and blood, but it relied on relentless conquest rather than sustainable governance. Darius, by contrast, built something designed to last. His strategies, both military and administrative, created structures that endured long after his death. Consider the satrapy system. In delegating authority to provincial governors, Darius ensured that his empire could function without the king's direct presence in every corner. Yet he balanced this autonomy with oversight, appointing royal inspectors, the king ears, who traveled the provinces to report on satraps' behavior. It was a system both efficient and intimidating, blending decentralization with absolute control. In military terms, this meant that revolts could be anticipated, supply lines maintained, and campaigns coordinated across vast distances. No other general of his age, or perhaps of any, managed such integration of civil and military power. In foreign campaigns, Darius demonstrated a patience rare among conquerors. Where others sought rapid victories, he aimed for sustainable domination. His eastern campaigns into India were not about glory, but about securing frontiers, gaining access to resources, and extending influence. In Scythia, he tested the limits of warfare, pursuing nomadic tribes into the steppes where no empire had dared to march. Though inconclusive, the campaign revealed his willingness to experiment, to confront unconventional foes on their own terrain. Even in partial setbacks, he gathered intelligence, tested strategies, and refined methods that future generations would draw upon. His navy, built from the expertise of Phoenicians and Greeks, was another innovation. By uniting maritime and land forces, he ensured that Persia could project power across seas as well as continents. He understood the interconnectedness of war, trade, and diplomacy, weaving them into a single strategy. The canal connecting Nile and Red Sea, though partly symbolic, reflected this vision. Oceans themselves would bend to imperial needs. What made Darius great, then, was not a single victory, but a career of calculated brilliance. He knew when to crush and when to co-opt, when to march with armies and when to build with stone. His reign represents a blending of military might with the subtler arts of governance. This is why he remains more than a conqueror. He was a creator of empire. Even his failures, such as Marathon, reveal as much about his scale of ambition as about his limitations. Few rulers could even contemplate bridging the Aegean to conquer independent Greek states. Fewer still could mobilize armies of such diversity and scale. That Athens could resist him speaks less to his weakness than to the resilience of a people fighting for survival. In the long view of history, Persia remained dominant, while Greece's victory was but a flicker of defiance in a larger age of imperial supremacy. Yet, Darius's story is not solely of power. It is also of vision, faith, and identity. He grounded his rule in Zoroastrian belief, declaring himself the chosen of Ahura Mazda. This divine sanction was not mere propaganda, but the foundation of his moral authority. In an age where kingship required not only force but legitimacy, Darius wielded religion as both shield and sword. His empire was not a random collection of conquests, but a cosmic order, defended by his armies and blessed by the divine. The resonance of his reign can be traced in echoes throughout history. The Greeks who resisted him would later adopt elements of his system under Alexander. The Romans, in their road networks and provincial governance, mirrored Persian innovations. Even the concept of imperial communication and courier systems would shape medieval and modern empires. Darius's vision extended far beyond his own lifetime. Thus, when one contemplates the title, "The Greatest General in History," one must consider not only victories but legacies. Darius did not simply command battles, he commanded civilization itself. He left behind not a temporary mark, but a structure upon which others built. His greatness lies in endurance, in the ability to shape history itself rather than merely dominate it for a moment. In the twilight of his reign, Darius could look upon his empire and see the realization of a dream few could imagine. From the valleys of the Indus to the shores of the Aegean, from the deserts of Arabia to the mountains of Anatolia, a vast mosaic lay under his command. Armies patrolled its borders, officials collected its revenues, and roads stitched its peoples together. It was not an empire without tension, but it was an empire that endured, and in that endurance lay its triumph. The construction of Persepolis perhaps best reflects the culmination of his vision. Unlike Susa, the administrative capital, Persepolis was ceremonial, a place designed to awe. Its terraces rose from the plain like a stage for imperial ritual, its stairways adorned with carvings of subject peoples bringing tribute. Here the empire presented itself not as fragmented dominions, but as a harmonious order, with each nation playing its part. The symbolism was unmistakable. Under Darius, diversity was not weakness but strength, bound together by loyalty to the great king. Even after his death, this vision remained. His son Xerxes would inherit the throne and continue the wars against Greece, but the foundation had already been laid. Xerxes might falter, but the empire endured, its structures too strong to collapse overnight. For 2 centuries after Darius, Persia remained a dominant force, a testament to the systems he created. In the memory of history, Darius is often overshadowed by figures like Alexander, whose dazzling conquests captured imaginations, or Cyrus, the founder of empire. Yet it was Darius who shaped Persia into a model of imperial governance, who demonstrated that conquest without order is fleeting. His reign reminds us that the measure of greatness is not in the flash of victory, but in the endurance of achievement. And so, when we reflect upon the title of the greatest general, we see in Darius a figure who transcends the battlefield. He was a master of strategy, not only in war but in statecraft. He commanded legions, yes, but also economies, religions, and cultures. He fought with armies but also with symbols, roads, and laws. His campaigns extended beyond fields of battle into the very structure of human civilization. In the end, Darius the Great was not defined by Marathon or by the rebellions he crushed. He was defined by the empire he left behind, vast, resilient, and transformative. He proved that greatness lies not in the act of conquest, but in the art of creation, in the forging of something larger than oneself. The story of Darius is the story of vision made real, of ambition tempered with calculation, of empire as both sword and shield. It is the story of a man who looked upon the known world and dared to bind it together. And in that audacity, in that enduring legacy, lies the reason why history remembers him not only as a king, but as the greatest general of his age, and perhaps of all time.